Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The Saints last week, of course, lost 2 games in 5 days, dropped to 2-5. They're 3 games under 500. And in a mathematically unlikely spot to do anything of significance. Like we talked about last week, after they lost to Cincinnati at 2-4, only 10% of teams that started a season 2-4 had ever made the postseason. So that's why that Thursday night game in Arizona was so critical. And they went on the road, and they committed 3 turnovers, 2 pick sixes. You all know what happened. Dropped them to 2-5. They lost to a team that had been anemic offensively all year and allowed them to score 42 points. Now, I know 14 of those came on pick sixes, but so that means 28 points for the Arizona offense, which had scored 9 the week before against Seattle, which is one of the worst defenses in the league. You all get it. And at 2-5, your season should be over. Your opportunity to make the playoffs should be over. Mathematically, it's possible because you could win out and you could go 12-5 and you'd be in the playoffs. But realistically, at 2-5 and facing the schedule the Saints are, that's too much of an uphill climb. And I told you last week, and I teed off on Dennis Allen, he deserved it because he basically has blamed injuries for why the team is where they are, not in any way taking accountability for the fact that you're -10 in the turnover margin, you're dead last in giveaways, and you're last in the NFL in penalties. Those are discipline things. Those are things that are coachable, and you and your staff are doing a very poor job. So I teed off on Dennis Allen, and he deserved it, and I still don't think that this team, this franchise under Dennis Allen, will do anything of great consequence. With all of that said, Tampa lost to Carolina on Sunday, and the Falcons got blown out as well. So, you're 1 game out of first place in the division. Tampa and Atlanta are both 3-4. You're 2-5. And so we have to have the conversation about the Saints possibly making the playoffs this year, because your division is so bad, and Tampa offensively is not getting better, and Atlanta is atrocious, and you should not in any way trust Marcus Mariota. Now, you're going to flip that and say, well, Matt, how can you trust Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton? That you shouldn't. I'm not saying you should. You're talking about 4 very bad football teams. You don't trust any of them, but somebody has to win the division, which means somebody from the NFC South is going to the playoffs. I had someone ask me yesterday, hey, Matt, if the Saints could maybe get to 7-10, 8-9 and win the division, would you want them to? Hell yeah, I want them to. Yo, it's still the NFL. Like, when you start the season, everybody knows the rules. You win the division, you go to the playoffs. In the history of the NFL, 5 times have teams advanced to the playoffs with a losing record. Now, 2 of them were in 1982. That was the strike year. The 1982 Cleveland Browns went 4-5 and lost their first playoff game to the Raiders. The 1982 Detroit Lions went 4-5 and lost their playoff game to Washington. Now, it's happened 3 times more recently. 2 of them intimately involved the New Orleans Saints. Of course, after the Browns and Lions in 1982, the strike season made the playoffs with losing records. The next time it happened was 2010. And you don't need me to remind you, but out of obligation I will. That's when the 7-9 Seahawks hosted the defending Super Bowl champion New Orleans Saints in a wild card game up in Seattle, and the Saints were bested by the Beastquake, the now infamous Beastquake, with Marshawn Lynch running through a defense of grown men like they were children, and then gratuitously grabbing his crotch as he dove into the end zone to break all of our hearts. That was 2010. In 2014, the Carolina Panthers made the playoffs as the NFC South champion with a 7-8-1 record. They beat the Saints by a half a game. The Saints finished that season 7-9. And if you remember how that season ended, The Saints lost to Carolina in Week 14, 41-10. And the Panthers backslid and then finishing the season on a 3-game winning streak to get in. The real kick in the gonads is that Atlanta beat New Orleans in Week 16 and then lost to Carolina in Week 17. Had Atlanta turned around and beaten Carolina in Week 17 like they beat New Orleans, the Saints would have been in the playoffs. So the Saints won in Week 17, beat Tampa, but got no help from Atlanta, and so the Saints were at home, and the Panthers, by virtue of a tie at 7-8-1, made the playoffs. And oh, by the way, Carolina beat Arizona in the wildcard round that year. So in 2010 and 2014, the team that got into the playoff with a losing record won their wildcard round game. It happened also in the COVID year. In 2020, Washington football team won a very bad NFC East at 7-9, and if you remember, they hosted Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and darn near beat them, but Brady rallied, they won, and then, of course, in the divisional round, Brady and the Bucs came to New Orleans, played the Saints, and ended Drew Brees' career, as we all remember, and went on to win the Super Bowl. But the Seahawks in 2010, the Panthers in 2014, Washington football team in 2020 have all made the playoffs with a losing record, and 2 of those 3 teams actually won their opening round game. So, do I want the Saints to find a pulse and find a way to hover around 500 and maybe sneak into the playoffs by winning this awful division? You're damn right I do. But in no way should that be any type of a commentary on Dennis Allen's ability to get the most out of this team. Because if they're sitting there below 500 making the playoffs, that's a joke. With all the talent you have and all you have invested in this team and the way that you have managed to mangle games so far in this season, I have no confidence they'll get there, by the way. For what it's worth, our friends over at DraftKings have updated divisional odds. Right now, Tampa is still the favorite at -225. So Tampa, despite all of their issues, despite the fact that they scored 3 points at Carolina yesterday, 3 points, Tampa is still a prohibitive favorite to win the division at -225. The Falcons are next at +275. The Saints are an extreme long shot at +1100, meaning you bet $100 to win $1,100, and the Panthers are at +1800. And the reason makes a lot of sense. Look at the Saints' schedule. This is what we talked about all offseason. The Saints had some winnable games early. The real meat grinder was in the middle, and then you had some opportunities late, but you had to get ahead, survive the middle, and finish strong. Well, they stumbled early. They're in the meat grinder, and who knows how they're going to finish and if it'll even matter. But you got the Raiders this weekend, and you're a home dog to the Raiders. Then you're at home against the Ravens on Monday Night Football. You're not going to be favored in that one either. You got to go to Pittsburgh, who's not very good right now, but that's still a road game in Pittsburgh in November. You're home against the Rams. You're at the Niners. You certainly won't win that one. You're at Tampa, which feels maybe more winnable because Tampa stinks too. You're home against Atlanta, which is a winnable game. You're at Cleveland. Remember, Deshaun Watson's going to be back for that one. You're at Philly, why even show up? And then you're home against the Panthers. So, Steelers, Bucks, Falcons, Panthers. There's maybe 4 games I could consider the Saints would have a legitimate shot to go win those games, but 2 of them are on the road. Even if you get those 4, that puts you at 6. You're 6-11. You're not winning this division. You're going to have to do something extraordinary to get back into a spot where you're going to be able to win this division. Or maybe you just keep hoping that the rest of the division continues to suck and craps down their leg and you end up somehow backdooring into the playoffs with like a 6-win team. I mean, it would be certainly unprecedented, but we have to at least keep having the conversation until it is a mathematical extreme for the Saints to be able to get into the playoffs. But 1 game back in the division, you have to have the conversation. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.